Hey, I'm Neurosurgeon Kazu.
Welcome to this explainer. Let's just dive right in, shall we? Because honestly, how many times have you read a textbook over and over, only to sit down, stare at a test paper the next day, and just completely blank out? We've all been there. Well, today, we're unpacking some incredibly effective, science-backed techniques from neurosurgeon Dr. Kazu. We're going to look at how to map our study habits directly to our biology to drastically improve memory retention. So if you've ever felt like your memory is just failing you, you're absolutely going to want to pay close attention to this breakdown.
So why do we forget so easily? We really have to start by addressing this common frustration. You put in the work, you learn the steps, you memorize the names, you read the reference books, and yet, it just slips away. It's so easy to panic, right? To think, my memory is just declining as I get older, or I just don't have a natural talent for memorizing stuff. But, as you'll see, the reality is actually far more biological than that. Yep, 99%. You see, your brain has this built-in memory control center called the hippocampus. And I want you to think of it kind of like a highly strict bouncer at a very exclusive club. To prevent your brain from literally panicking and overloading from the sheer volume of daily stimuli, this bouncer actively discards 99% of all incoming information. It's a completely normal, totally healthy function. So forgetting, it isn't your fault at all. It's just your brain doing exactly what it was designed to do to protect you.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, the myth of bad memory. Second, tricking the hippocampus. Third, 3 rules for retention. Fourth, brain hacks and sleep. And finally, the ultimate daily routine. Let's start with Section 1, the myth of bad memory, effort versus biology. Drawing from his daily, clinical perspective as an active neurosurgeon, Dr. Kazu points out something absolutely crucial. Ignoring how the brain physically works while trying to memorize things is exactly like pouring water into a leaky bucket. Rote memorization, just reading a textbook over and over, relies purely on sheer effort. It completely ignores your actual biology. We really need to shift to brain-compatible methods. We have to patch the holes in the bucket before we start pouring the water in. Moving right along to Section 2, tricking the hippocampus, survival mode. Okay, so if the hippocampus naturally tosses out 99% of what you learn, what do? Well, you have to trick it. You have to trick it into believing the data is crucial for your literal physical survival. And the bouncer looks for 2 very specific criteria to flag information as important. First up is short-term repetition. If the exact same information floods in repeatedly over a very short time, the brain just assumes it must be a persistent survival factor. Second is emotional or sensory stimulus. If your emotions or your 5 senses are highly engaged, the brain registers the event as critical. These 2 things are your keys to bypassing that bouncer. Which brings us to Section 3, 3 rules for retention. The biological blueprint. The absolute game changer here is the golden ratio of learning. 30% input, 70% output. Passive reading, which is pure input, just doesn't convince the hippocampus that the information matters. So what actually does? Output. Recalling information without looking, explaining it out loud to a friend, or even writing it down from scratch. Actually, scratch that. It's more about the struggle. That specific moment when you're desperately trying to remember an answer, that creates a massive stimulus. It forcibly strengthens those neural circuits in a way that just passively reading never ever will. Spend 70% of your time testing yourself, not just reading. Rule number 2 is all about timing. It dictates exactly when you should be doing that output. It takes a 4-step review cycle to officially upgrade short-term data into a lifelong memory. Step 1, review the material on the exact same day you learned it, stimulating the brain before that memory fades. Step 2, review it again the very next day to promote the shift from short-term to long-term storage. Step 3, review 1 week later. This forcefully stops the natural forgetting curve in its tracks. And Step 4, review 1 month later. By that 4th hit, the hippocampus basically surrenders and finally categorizes the data as a permanent, lifelong memory. Now, our 3rd rule leverages something called episodic memory. Rote memorization of plain, dry facts just puts a huge, boring burden on your brain. But if you attach an emotion to a fact, like surprise, doubt, or even intense curiosity, you activate the amygdala, and the amygdala happens to sit right next door to the hippocampus in the brain. When it lights up with emotion, it essentially nudges the hippocampus and says, hey, pay attention, this is a really big deal. By finding the why behind a fact, or maybe creating a funny little story around it, your retention rate will absolutely skyrocket. Let's look at Section 4 now, brain hacks and sleep, chemistry and consolidation. Now for the actual physiological requirements. Before you even sit down to study, you need to utilize a neurosurgeon's secret weapon, a 20-minute pre-habit of light cardio. We're talking brisk walking, maybe doing a few squats. Why? Well, getting your heart rate up increases blood flow to the brain, and that triggers the hippocampus to release something called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor. I want you to think of BDNF as high-grade fertilizer for your brain cells. It promotes neural development and perfectly preps the biological soil, so to speak, so that whatever you learn next takes root immediately. Once you've actually learned the material, you have to save the file. Pulling an all-nighter to cram for a test, that is absolutely the worst thing you can do for your memory. No joke. Memories are entirely reorganized and officially transferred from the hippocampus over to the cerebral cortex, which is your long-term hard drive, strictly while you sleep. And not just any sleep, but specifically during the deep sleep phase that occurs right after you first fall asleep. If you skip sleep, you are essentially typing a 10-page essay and just slamming the laptop shut without hitting save.
Which naturally brings us to the behaviors you absolutely must avoid. Here are 3 no-good habits you really need to stop right now. First, multitasking, like checking your smartphone while you're studying. It totally scatters your brain's processing power and ensures absolutely nothing sticks in the hippocampus. Second, lack of sleep. As we just covered, this leaves memory unorganized and builds up toxic brain fatigue. And third, chronic stress. This one is vital, folks. When you're highly stressed, your body releases the hormone cortisol, which physically damages and shrinks the actual cells in your hippocampus. Stress literally destroys your biological hardware.
Finally, Section 5, the ultimate daily routine, putting it all together. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is exactly how Dr. Kazu structures a day to maximize brain potential, and it's something you can start doing tomorrow morning. Step 1, in the morning, start with that light exercise to release your BDNF brain fertilizer. Then, immediately tackle your most intense, important study topics while your focus is at its absolute peak. Step 2, throughout the afternoon and evening, shift entirely to the golden ratio. Put the books away and focus on output. Explain what you learn out loud to someone or jot it down on a blank piece of paper entirely from memory. Step 3, right before bedtime, do a very quick review of the day's facts. This gives the hippocampus one last hit of repetition. And then, and this is critical, go straight to sleep without looking at your smartphone. Let that deep sleep do its job and transfer the data to your cerebral cortex. I really want to leave you with this final, truly empowering thought. The brain can upgrade its neural circuits at any age with the right stimulation. Memory has never, ever been about natural talent or getting older. It's just about respecting the biological rules of your brain. So knowing that you literally have the power to manually rewrite your brain's hard drive, what information will you choose to make unforgettable tomorrow? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Catch you next time.